The radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody. Welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this, what is it? It's Thursday, April 2nd. I hope everybody's having a fantastic week. Weekend is around the corner, and couple more days. All right, we are going to be discussing, I guess last night, Donald Trump gave an long-anticipated speech, talk about Iran, for the first time really addressed American people in a thorough, lengthy fashion about the motivation for the war, the causes of the war, and kind of updated them on how it's going. He probably gave his strongest defense of going to war that he has so far, basically arguing about the fact that the Iranians were developing nuclear weapons and they were going to deploy them. Again, maybe he's exaggerating a little bit in terms of how immediate that was, given what the United States did to the Iranian nuclear program in June, and when they would have a bomb or when they would have a missile capable of hitting America. That's probably a couple of years away. But anyway, he made the argument. I thought the original argument about the killing of Americans and that he made at the beginning of the war was a good argument and should have been integrated more into this. The fact that Iran posed a threat to Americans wherever they were, the fact that the Iranians did not hesitate since 1979 to kill Americans over and over and over and over again, in addition to the nuclear argument, should have been made. But and the fact that they, the argument Leonard Peikoff makes in his statement after 9/11, that basically the Iranians were the spiritual motor, the spiritual inspiration behind all Islamist terrorism. So those are all the reasons for the war. Trump kind of touched upon some of them, but at least he addressed American people and said, "This is why we're going to war," and I think that was good as well. He praised Israel, he praised the Gulf, and promised that he would not let them be harmed. I guess reassuring them, particularly the Gulf states, that they would continue to be protected by Americans even after the U.S. maybe leaves ends this particular phase of the war. He didn't mention withdrawing from NATO in this talk. This is a formal talk written out. Somebody edited it, so he didn't get to that. I have a feeling if it was extemporaneous, he would have gone after NATO more aggressively. He did mention NATO. He did mention NATO countries in a minute. We'll get to that in a minute. He warned Iran's leaders that they will not survive if they keep fighting. He told American people that the Iranian military is being devastated, and it has. So in terms of his assessment of how the war has gone so far, in terms of devastating the Iranian military infrastructure, the IRGC, and Iranian leadership, he was right on point. But he committed, and we'll see if he lives up to this, but he committed to continuing the war, to devastating effects for the Iranians if they don't abandon their nuclear and terror ambitions. There was no offer of a ceasefire. There was a suggestion of a deal, but that deal included giving up nuclear and terror ambitions. So overall, kind of a positive, aggressive, no compromise message, which is good. Now he did repeat what he said in the past. That is that there was a real possibility of escalation He threatened to destroy the country's infrastructure, including its oil facilities, electric power production, if Iran's leaders decided to go down fighting, that is, didn't cut a deal with him. Now, again, he's been threatening that for weeks now, and he keeps delaying. So I don't know if I take that seriously. I think that's what he would like to do. I think that's within Trump's temperament. Yeah, let's just flatten the place. But whether he will actually do it is a different question. We will see. He's definitely threatening, and he's threatening enough that maybe the Iranians will take him seriously, although it's hard to believe they would, given that he's threatened so many times. I'll give you a list of threats with regard, just as statements about the almost straight in a minute. Clearly coming out of the speech, which is good news, I think, for me and for us and for the world, is Trump is not walking away from this. He's not just picking up and walking away. Not yet, anyway. We got 2 weeks, maybe 3, right? And there might be escalation. But, what happens then? What happens then is not clear. He said he doesn't care about the homo straight, which is interesting. He said that the homo straight can be easily opened up once the bombing stops. I don't know where he gets that from. The reality is that when the bombing stops, there's no reason why the Iranians can't continue to kind of control the straits, take a toll, determine what ships go in and what ships go out. He mentioned the fact that they want to open it up because they have oil to sell. From the perspective of Iranian oil, the Hormuz Straits are open now. They're selling oil. They don't have any problem selling oil. And the United States, horrifically and surprisingly, and I don't know why, with no explanation, is letting Iranian ships just out of the Persian Gulf and through the Hormuz Straits and off to India and China to sell their oil. So Iran's oil is flowing. It's the UAE, it's Saudi Arabia, it's Bahrain, it's Kuwait, it's Iraq. Their oil is not flowing. So the Straits, he says something like, the Straits will open up naturally once the bombing stops. No. Indeed, there's talk about Iran and Oman cutting a deal. Oman has been, even though they got bombed by Iran, is still being friendly to the Iranians. I think they have a sense that they have to live with them after all this is done. And there's talk about them dividing up the spoils of controlling the Straits of Hormuz and limiting shipping. Whether that happens or not is unclear. But there's no sign, there's no indication that once the bombing stops, there is, everything goes back to normal. Zero. So whether he likes it or not, Trump said, let the countries that care about the Hormuz Straits worry about it. He also said, we don't import any oil from the Straits. It doesn't matter. It turns out that we import about 125 super tanker worth of oil. 3 to 5% of our oil comes from the Gulf. It's a small amount, but it's still something. I've told you before about the different types of oil, and because of export patterns, because of refineries, because of stuff like that, we still import oil from the Gulf. So, we have an interest. But the bigger interest is oil markets are global markets. If other countries can't get their oil, that affects us. Oil prices will go up. And, we started this war to end the war with a strategic, kind of massive strategic card just handed on a silver platter to the Iranians is just unthinkable. It's just unthinkable. So whether he likes it or not, he's going to have to solve the Straits of Hormuz problem. And he still won't commit to how he's going to do that. He doesn't seem like he's going to walk away, but he doesn't seem like he's going to stay and solve it either. And he seems right now to be saying, let the Europeans and the Asians solve this problem. We don't want to have anything to do with it. That ain't happening. It just is not happening. Now, here's just a list of statements Trump has made about the Straits, right? From the beginning of the war to today. Just a sample. He's made many more statements than this, but just to give you a sense of the erratic nature, which should not surprise you if you listen to my show in terms of Trump. But anyway, all right. Here it is. It's the beginning of the war. Iran won't close the Straits. Iran better open the Straits. Iran has 2 days to open the Straits. Iran has a week to open the Straits. NATO, open the Straits. I'll bomb your critical infrastructure if the Straits isn't opened. I don't care about the Straits. No ceasefire until Straits is open. And yesterday it was back to other people open up the Straits, and I don't care about the Straits, and the Straits will open up naturally, all by themselves. We've got a very frustrating. We've got a very frustrating president. Again, I mean, I commend the U.S. and Trump and Israel for starting this war, for the brilliant execution in the air, in terms of taking out the Iranian military and leadership and all of that. I think they've done a brilliant job. This has been a military. It's just unbelievable success. As I said, I think a bigger kind of wow for what the Israelis have done, but both the Israelis and the Americans have done a truly unbelievable, phenomenal job here. And yet, the big flaw in all of this is that going into this, it wasn't a major, number one, strategic focus of the Trump administration. This is squarely in America, not in Israel. Israel has no involvement in the Straits. How do we not just open the Straits, how do we keep the Straits open? I mean, imagine if on day one there had been deployment to guarantee the Straits being opened. What that deployment looks like, we can debate, discuss. But imagine if on the day one there had been a plan in motion to keep the Straits open. Then Iran by now will have surrendered. There would be nothing. They would have nothing. They would have no leverage over anybody. They could still be bombing, I guess, with their missiles, the Gulf states. But that is having less and less of an impact as they're getting better and better defending themselves, and as Iran has fewer and fewer missiles. But the the only card really Iran has right now is the Straits of Hormuz. Imagine if that had been taken off the table on day one. It wasn't, and it's not clear what is going to happen and how it's going to be dealt with as we move forward. So anyway, Trump tried yesterday to convince the American people this was a good war and we would win it, that it's in the national interest. It's hard to say how well he did vis-a-vis the American people. I think for the most part, they're still pretty skeptical. It was his first, really only direct sales pitch, like 20 minutes of just doing this. After a month of combat, you would have expected this on day one. And it is true that he highlighted the success. He said something like, never in history of warfare has an enemy suffered such a clear and devastating large-scale losses in a matter of weeks. I'd even say in a matter of days. His best line by far was when he said, which is, I have to say, I know this is me being immodest, but I have to say this is a direct line from my speeches and my Q&As from 20 years ago. 20 years ago, people would ask me, what should we do about Iran? And I would say, bomb them so that they have the infrastructure their culture deserves. Bomb them back to the Stone Age. And that's what Trump said yesterday. He said that he would pummel the country, quote, back to the Stone Age, where they belong. And where their ideology belongs, where those who advocate for their ideology belong. Better line best line of the evening. I don't think he will do it, but again, that's that's where it is. He also said gas prices would rapidly come back, and stock prices would rapidly go back up. Stock prices probably will recover pretty quickly. Gas prices, it'll take months just to get those tankers out, to get the supply chains working, to get everything aligned. Some places it'll be slower than others. California, expect that $7 gas for a while. It's going to be a while before that comes down. So yeah. Let's see. So, it's hard to tell. There was some good lines. For these terrorists to have nuclear weapons would be an intolerable threat. Agree completely. The most violent and thuggish regime on earth would be free to carry out their campaign of terror, coercion, conquest, and mass murder from behind a nuclear shield. I will never let that happen. I mean, every American president has said that. To Trump's credit, he's the first one to actually do something about it in action, right? So much for my TDS. I don't know what's happening to me today. God, some of you must be worried. I might be losing my TDS. What are my haters going to do? Trump said that the Tehran killed 45,000 Iranians during the demonstrations. I haven't heard that high of a number. It's possible. I don't know where he got that. He repeated that the regime right now is less radical and more reasonable. I'm not sure whether there is such a thing, but maybe. Anyway, we will see what happens. We will see what happens. Iran's response to all of this is we don't want to cease fire. We're winning this. Is basically the response. The oil market was not impressed by the speech, and I think particularly his statement about the Straits of Hormuz. I mean, what the oil market, what people buying and selling oil wanted from the speech was a clear commitment by Trump to say the Straits of Hormuz will be opened. They will be open. Might take days, might take weeks, but it will be open. And we will guarantee that it's open. We would like our allies to help us, but we will do it. If he had said that, oil prices would have come down significantly. Instead, he said, it'll open naturally once the bombing stops, and who knows when that'll happen. Maybe after we destroy the infrastructure. And he also said, we'll bomb their oil fields. So maybe by the time the Straits of Hormuz are open, there is no Iranian oil flowing. That takes a big chunk of oil off of the world market, in particular at a time where Russian oil is struggling to get out of Russia because of Ukrainian bombing. So what happened in the oil market, and I haven't looked in the last few minutes, but I should look just to give you the most updated numbers. But yeah, what happened in the oil market basically is starting with the speech, starting once the speech ended, oil spiked up, and then since then has been drifting upwards back to some of its all-time, or at least this crisis high. It was as high as 113 early this morning. It's down at about 111, but that is way above. If you remember, just a few days ago, it was under 90 because the world believed the U.S. would open the straits, or the world believed that a deal would be cut. And now Trump is saying, no, we're going to bomb them into oblivion and we're not going to open the straits. That's bad news across all realms for the oil market. So we're seeing oil, again, 111. In spite of that, the stock market's basically flat. Opened up this morning, way down, and came up and is basically flat now. So oil up, gold way down, silver way down, 4%, dollar way down, interest rates down, which is surprising, but interest rates down, dollar down, Bitcoin for whatever it's worth. The ability of the Iranians to destroy Gulf oil with drones is very limited. The Gulf countries are getting much, much better at downing those drones. They're getting Ukrainian help in doing that. And the reality is the supply of drones in Iran is shrinking. They're launching fewer and fewer drones every single day. And they're hitting fewer and fewer targets with those drones. More and more of those drones are being shot down. So, I don't think I think people are worried about Gulf oil, and that's why, right, maybe the market is responding the way it is, why oil is so expensive. But at the end of the day, Iran's capabilities are very limited given how much the military and the infrastructure has been devastated. All right. So that's the speech. I wish it had been done differently. I wish the emphasis on the Straits of Hormuz would have been there. But I've been wishing that since we talked about it right here on the show from the opening days. At the time, I thought there'd be a strategy. A weekend, it became clear there wasn't a strategy. That's when I became really worried and started talking about this. You all testimony, it's all on video. Straits of Hormuz are the key. I think are the key. Now, granted, if you can achieve regime change, then I agree, Straits of Hormuz open naturally. But it has to be one of the two. You have to either go for regime change, unequivocal, get rid of them, and put in a really moderate regime, somebody who's really willing to play ball, or ideally, a liberal democracy, or you open the straits. You can't not do both. You cannot not do both. One or the other, or if you do one, the other one maybe falls into place. Regime change to anything but the guys there right now. All right, anything that is not Islamist, anything that is not religious, anything that is not the mullahs in control. That's the regime change. Military dictatorship, okay, if it's basically a secular military dictatorship. I don't know, moderate religious parties that don't enforce Sharia law, fine. Liberal democracy, amazing. Constitutional monarchy, amazing. Lots of options. Lots of options. There's lots of opposition. A majority of the Iranian people oppose this regime. Once you get rid of the people at the top, some people will arise. But you have to make that a goal. You have to make that a mission, and you have to cultivate whoever is out there, whether they're in Iran or outside of Iran, to replace the current regime. All of it is doable with the right kind of strategic thinking, planning, and execution. And the execution is not that hard. They've shown that they can do it. Anyway, let's see. All right, in terms of where we are in the war itself, again, U.S. and Israel have severely degraded Iran's missile capabilities. The missiles targeting Israel have declined steadily, in spite of the fact that yesterday was Passover. There was a slight increase. They're still firing, and they're firing very few missiles per salvo. They're doing many salvos just to piss off the Israelis, just to upset them. But no damage. I'll put it this way, very little damage and very, very few casualties. Basically, the capabilities have been reduced dramatically. Their short-range missiles capability, which target the Gulf states. Hard to tell where they are, but again, the number of missiles have declined significantly. But it's steady, right? It hasn't declined as dramatically as Israel. Different types of missiles. The Israeli missiles are more medium range, Gulf short range, different type of stuff. That the drones can be effective in the Gulf states, cannot be effective in Israel. It just takes too long for the drones to get there. But it's hard to tell how much is left of the missiles. The U.S. has been bombing stockpiles. You can see in terms of the size of the explosions and the after explosions and the missiles shooting out from the exploded sites that it's happening. But again, hard to tell how much is left and what's possible. Thousands of IRGC troops from generals down, lots of generals. But troops as well have been killed, somewhere around 5,000 at least. 20,000 injured. That's conservative estimates. Again, production sites, factories, assembly sites, Iranians' military industrial complex has been devastated, destroyed. It's not zero, but it's destroyed. Right? In terms of missile stockpiles, they think they've destroyed a third, and a third are inaccessible. Right? And they're still going at it. So, it could be that they've destroyed a lot more than the third. They've destroyed internal security institutions. There's a whole echelon of Basij and IRGC responsible for internal security. This is why I think regime change can happen, because these are the people responsible for oppressing their own people. Many of those have been killed. There's a real sense of fear and paranoia among Iranian security personnel. And they're now shifting from permanent bunkers, headquarters, and where they're communicating, to mobile headquarters, basically RVs, where they are they're running the war from mobile command centers. Indeed, the Israeli Air Force has been hunting those down in the last couple of days and trying to take those out as well. Now, what Iran has maintained the capability of is disrupting shipping, although there is signs today that some ships are actually getting out of the Hormuz Straits close to Oman. Most of the ships Iran is allowing out go up towards Iran, and they go in Iranian waters. They pay a toll, supposedly $2 million in yuan or crypto, and then they go along the shore of Iran and they get out. Now we're seeing ships that are obviously not paying the toll, that are hugging the UAE coast and then the Omani coast and going around. This is much closer to the regular route the ships took out of the Hormuz Straits. Now, what that might suggest, this is my optimistic moment, I guess. This is my optimistic side. That might suggest that the U.S. is now maybe has a presence there in Oman. That maybe in some maybe they've got some maybe the A-10s and the helicopters are patrolling that area. They might even have some boats there, ships there, or maybe some troops right at the tip, the tip of Oman where the transit happens. But they might be covering that territory to allow these ships out. And what we might be seeing right now, today, is basically an experiment to see if they can get away with it. So you're seeing one ship at a time crossing the Omani Straits. We'll know in a few hours whether they were successful and where they got out of the Hormuz Straits on the Omani side. If they have, and if they do, that would suggest that it's possible, right? That the United States, has done enough damage to the Iranian Navy infrastructure so that they are so much weaker that they can't attack these ships. And second, that the U.S., because they have these A-10s and they have the helicopters flying low over the water, looking for maybe speedboats, maybe missiles, potentially drones, to try to shoot them out of the air. Maybe that is the strategy, and maybe this will allow more ships to get out of the Hormuz Straits. It will be interesting. And it could be that, Trump was faking everybody out yesterday by saying, in a sense, he doesn't care about the Hormuz Straits, and yet the military is deploying. Look, the military has probably a dozen different plans on how to open up the Hormuz Straits. There's no way, and we've heard from former Navy officers, clearly the United States has plans to open the Hormuz Straits. It could be that they're slowly implementing some of those plans. Let's see. Yeah, naval infrastructure is being degraded continuously. I don't understand why there's any of that left. There are these two big islands that the Iranians use for the toll that are close to the Iranian shore. I don't understand why those islands have not been basically completely flattened into oblivion. I just don't understand it from a military tactical perspective. If you want to open up the Hormuz Straits, why aren't you completely destroying the ability of the Iranians to monitor the straits, to follow it? You don't have to put ground troops on there. Just use enough B-52s to basically level the place and then go on. So hard to tell exactly. Maybe we'll learn more about the tactics after the fact. All right. So, the war is going to continue at least 2-3 weeks, according to Trump. He's trying to get a deal. And the deal will be never again to restart nuclear program, long range, never again to have a long range missile program. And that includes medium range missiles and limits on even the short range missiles. And never again to have a significant Navy, and never again to use terror proxies. And that's what he wants, a deal that guarantees all that in 3 weeks. Don't know if they're going to get it, but Trump said yesterday, if you believe him, that if they don't get it, he's going to take Iran back to the Stone Age. I'm sympathetic to the sentiment of taking it back. Let's see. Yeah, again, there's no way for the Straits of Hormuz not to open, and for the U.S. to come out of this unscathed. The Straits of Hormuz is a disaster if they're not opened, and if this war doesn't achieve their opening. There was a good analysis of kind of the islands around the Hormuz Straits in the Wall Street Journal yesterday. It's called the islands that give Iran a stranglehold on the Straits of Hormuz. It actually shows you maps of the islands where they have airports, where they have ports. And this is part of what really is stunning to me, how these islands still, in a sense, exist. The airports are still there. The ports are still there. They still have infrastructure. I mean, literally, these islands should be flattened. I mean, the biggest island is Qasim. And then opposite it is Rhetoric, and the ships that are approved by the Iranians are going between those two. The three islands I showed you on a map the other day, the Greater Tumb, Lesser Tumb, and Abu Musa, those three islands really control much of the straits themselves, or at least the entrance into the straits. Those islands were taken by the Shah in 1971 or 2 from the UAE. Those could easily be occupied by the U.S. with very little cost, I think, and basically after the war returned to the UAE. That would be compensation for the UAE for all the bad stuff that's happened to them. And Nate says that ARI's biggest donor is the Mossad. Cool. How much do they give us? I'm curious. God, I didn't know that. But is the Mossad giving us a lot of money? I hope so. Anyway, that is the. If you're interested in maps, if you're interested in the in kind of the Hormuz Straits, check out Wall Street Journal article yesterday on the islands that give Iran a stranglehold on the Straits of Hormuz. Yeah, we talked about that. Oh yeah, today, interesting, really interesting. Maybe this is Trump is sending a signal today to the Iranians that he is serious about destroying their infrastructure, completely destroying their infrastructure. There is a big bridge, a major bridge. It's the tallest bridge, or the tallest bridge in the Middle East, or something like that. It's called the B1 bridge, which connects Tehran to Karaj. So Karaj is to the west. And this bridge was used to move a lot of military equipment from Tehran towards the west. A lot of supposedly missile launches traversed this bridge. Anyway, it's a good-looking bridge. It's going to be hard to rebuild. It's over a big gorge. And today, the United States, I think it was the U.S., bombed it and created like a gap in the bridge. And that wasn't good enough. So they bombed it again. And this time the columns fell down and the bridge is basically gone. Not easy to rebuild this bridge. It's going to cost a lot of money and it's going to take a lot of time. And I think this is like hey, Iranians, if you don't believe me about destroying your infrastructure, here's a little sampler. Here's a little test. Indeed, Donald Trump tweeted, "The biggest bridge in Iran comes tumbling down, never to be used again. Much more to follow. It is time for Iran to make a deal before it's too late, and there is nothing left of what still should become a great country." So, thumbs up on that one to Trump. That is all good. Israel today struck the central headquarters of the IRGC in Tehran, which was used. This is one of the headquarters. This one was used to manage budgets for terror activities worldwide. Funds were routed through these headquarters for two central purposes: funding and strengthening Iran's armed forces by producing thousands of missiles, weapons, and regime's armed forces, and then funding dozens of billions of dollars to Iranian terror regime proxies in the Middle East, such as Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis, and the proxies in Iraq. They bombed us. They bombed the they bombed the central headquarters. But that does this also. They managed to kill the general in the IRGC responsible for these budgets and for this allocation of capital. So Israel continues to decapitate, to destroy the IRGC leadership. I mean, literally dozens and dozens of these generals have been taken out and killed. One of the horrific things that is going on while all this good stuff, relatively speaking, is happening, is that the regime itself is accelerating executions. It's accelerating the executions of regime, of people from the demonstrations and just regime opponents. They've executed 657 people since the beginning of the year. These are all regime opponents. These are not, these are not murderers or anything like that. It continues to execute its own people in record numbers. And that is happening while all this devastation is going on. All right, let's see. Anything else we want to talk about? That is, I think, the war. As of April 2nd, I'll keep monitoring it for you and keep you up to date in terms of what is going on. Who is this Nate 46? Maybe I should block him. Nobody charges $91 for a Band-Aid. You're obviously not an American, and you're obviously, one of these people who are completely, thoroughly, unbelievably ignorant of the American healthcare system. All right. Let's see. If you want to, let me just remind everybody, if you want to ask questions, don't do it in the chat. Just put a few dollars behind it. And use the super chat. I answer all the questions in the super chat, all of them, even the ones that are insulting and negative and stupid. I answer all of them. So put dollars behind it. I do it in the order of the dollar amount. So the more dollars you put, at least above 20 and below 20, kind of the categories. So, please, ask the questions through the super chat. Also, if you'd like to support the show, if you get value out of the show and you'd like to show value for value, so you become a trader with me, then please consider just making a small contribution or a large contribution, whatever you want, in the sticker, also in the Super Chat tab, but just without a question. So you can do that. That would be great. We do have a target. We're on track to get to the first hour target, but we are $70 short of that target. We got 20 minutes to make $70, so that shouldn't be too hard. 3 $20 questions will get there, or 3 $20 stickers will get there. In the meantime, I'll just thank friend Harper for his sticker, Stephen Harper for the sticker, and let's see who else. Those two. I really appreciate the stickers, and keep them coming, guys. Let's see if we can make it to 250 before the hour is out, because that's really what we need to do in order to sustain the Yaron Brook Show. All right. One of the things that I've argued and continue to argue and been arguing for over 20 years is the fact that the fall of the Iranian regime, the fall of the Iranian Islamist regime, and here it's important that what we need is the fall of Sharia law. We need the fall of the Islamist regime, whatever the hell replaces it, is less important. The fall of that regime will have global consequences because it will take the wind out, will take the inspiration out of the Islamist movement worldwide. And right now, and I think that is true, and I think that will happen. We won't go to zero, because the reality is that there's one group that is sustaining the Islamist program out there. The Islamist movement out there, and Nate has. Sorry, let me just do this. Nate has receipts. I have receipts too. I can show you my receipts if you show me your receipts. My receipts have a Band-Aid costing me basically $2 and covered by insurance. I can also show you relatively expensive medication everywhere in the world that I get for basically zero from my pharmacy because it's covered by insurance. I can show you, a lot of things that, you just make stuff up. Happy to show you, you can show receipts for what is charged to the insurance company. You have never paid $91 for Band-Aid. I have good insurance. I do. I have good insurance. I pay and I get good insurance. I don't get good insurance. I have a high deductible in that sense. I have a high deductible. But my pharmacy, there's certain drugs today. If you buy genetic drugs in the United States, those genetic drugs are about 97% cheaper than they are anywhere else in the world. So, you go and get your health insurance anywhere else in the world. Sorry, your health care anywhere else in the world, and you compare. I've lived under socialized medicine, and I monitor socialized medicine. I'll take the American system any day. And I know some of you were treated badly by the American healthcare system, by the insurance companies and so on. I sympathize, and I'm sorry that you've been treated badly. My experience has been unbelievable. I've been in the United States since for almost 40 years, and I've never had a problem with insurance. I even had, kids born. I had by C-section, when C-section was not covered. I was a student. I had nothing. Everything was fine. None of it has driven me into bankruptcy. None of it has made me angry. None of it. I've had surgeries. I've had everything. I've had really, really weird, symptoms. I've been in emergency rooms. I've been all over the place, and my treatment has been A+. And I'm a son of a doctor, A+, and the cost to me has been trivial. Given the quality that I've gotten, the cost has been trivial. Now, the healthcare system should be 1,000 times better and would be 1,000 times better in a free market, but it's still better than it would be under socialized healthcare. It just is. So yes, if you have insurance, you still get the best healthcare in the world, even if sometimes it's a hassle. And yes, I know that's not universal. Some of you don't, but my experience has been 100% positive. Anyway, I'm going to forget about Nate. I won't block him, but I'll forget about him, and we'll talk about the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood basically is what is keeping the Islamist vision alive outside of the Iranians. Now, the Muslim Brotherhood is unwelcome in the Middle East. Muslim Brotherhood is being kicked out of Egypt, and basically their members are killed. The organization is banned, and its leaders and preachers are being kicked out of Egypt, the birthplace of the Muslim Brotherhood. Saudi Arabia has dramatically curtailed the activities of the Muslim Brotherhood. It used to be a big base. Indeed, initially when the Muslim Brotherhood ran away from Egypt in the 1960s and 1970s, they went to Saudi Arabia, and it was the Muslim Brotherhood teachers who taught bin Laden. So bin Laden was educated by Muslim Brotherhoods in Saudi universities. But Saudis have had enough of them. They've kicked them out of Saudi Arabia. The UAE will have nothing to do with them. They're completely illegal in the UAE. UAE is adamantly against the Muslim Brotherhood. The only foothold they have in the Middle East, really, is Qatar, and to some extent, Syria under the new regime. However, outside of that, where is the big stronghold of Muslim Brotherhood? Well, sadly, it's in Europe. Europe is the bastion of Muslim Brotherhood activism, preaching, organization. The fact is that the refusal of Europe to see Islamism as an existential threat has prevented them from restricting the Muslim Brotherhood. I mean, Trump has now defined the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization, but only certain branches of it, not universally, which he should have, but not universally, because he doesn't want to piss off the Qataris, because he has something going on with Qatar. There's some love, some friendship, deep friendship going on there. But with the Qataris. So, that is the United States. But Europe is completely ignoring the problem. Muslim Brotherhood is actively, openly working in Europe. Now, as I said, I think the Iranian failure will take a lot of the wind out of the sail of the Muslim Brotherhood, but not completely. There will still have to be something, and they also take a lot of funding. There's no question in my mind that a lot of the funding the Muslim Brotherhood gets, particularly in Europe, comes from Iran indirectly, even though the Muslim Brotherhood is Sunni and the Iranians are Shiite. That has never prevented the Iranians in the past. They gave huge amounts of money, billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars to Hamas, which was a Sunni organization. And, the Muslim Brotherhood has grown in Europe as it has lost influence in the Middle East. Its leading preachers have moved to Europe. They preach the same kind of stuff they used to preach in the Middle East. Hatred of the West, hatred of anybody other than Muslims, Sharia law, Islamic takeover of the West, the legitimacy of using violence against the West, the legitimacy of rape and pillage and torture and anything in the name of Islam. And the West just goes, yeah, well, we just have to tolerate that because we're good old, Western liberals or whatever. So even if Iran is taken out, while, again, Muslim Brotherhood will become a lot weaker, they'll have a lot less money, and a lot of their passion will be gone, given that Iran, the one symbol of a country ruled by Sharia, successful and one that is a threat to all the other countries, including Israel and the United States, if that is taken out, if that is eliminated, maybe Allah doesn't support Sharia law. Maybe Allah is not as powerful as they think he is. And yet, they will still have some influence, and it's going to be up to the Europeans and the Americans to clamp down on them. Again, here's a funny story. I think I've mentioned this in the past. The UAE government is clamping down on scholarships for students who go to study in England because they're afraid that those students will be radicalized into Islamism in UK universities. That's pretty amazing, right? You've got places in Belgium where you have parallel societies and where Sharia law is the law and where the police don't go. In Germany, you see, Islamic Muslim Brotherhood groups growing in various cities. In Sweden, the Muslim Brotherhood, again, funded in this case by the Qataris. And the Qataris are part of the enemy. Like every time, like the Iranians bomb Qatar, I go, yes. But the Qataris fund the Muslim Brotherhood. In Sweden, there is a hotbed of Islamist ideology driven by Muslim Brotherhood with Qatari funding. Now, Qatar's going to have a lot less money because their LNG stuff was bombed. Maybe the world will wake up to Qatar. Maybe if Qatar wants to join the Abraham Accords, they will have to stop their support of the Muslim Brotherhood. I don't know. We will see how it all plays out. But I think that if Iran falls, a lot of these other dominoes will fall. So, the reality is that the Muslim Brothers is a real threat in Europe. Europeans are not taking it seriously at all. They don't seem to care. The Muslim Brotherhood is explicitly hostile to the West. It is inspired by the writings of Muslim Brotherhood intellectual, we'll call him Said Qutb, who lived in America for a while and was super hostile to America and to the West, and believed in that secular governance, any kind of secular governance, must be opposed, and whether it's in Arab states or in Western states. All right. So, maybe at some point, with the fall of Iran, people will also wake up and have the courage to resist the Muslim Brotherhood. I think if you do that, then the Islamist cause is finished. All Islam needs is for somebody to stand up against it and push, and they will crumble. They will crumble. They are powerless, just like the Iranians right now are powerless against the American and the Israeli forces. Their power lies in our own weakness. Their power lies in our own weakness. All right, let me again remind you that we have a target to reach. So questions. You get to shape the show. I mean, I see there's a lot of passion in the chat. Ask a question about it. Challenge me in the chat. Challenge me in the super chat about it. Don't be cheap. All right. A year ago, today, April 2nd, President Trump stood elected in the Rose Garden and announced Liberation Day. He put out a booklet of trade barriers, told the crowd that the tariffs that he was imposing would create jobs and factories will come roaring back in our country, and that it's going to happen immediately and it's going to happen fast, and the American economy is going to do amazingly well. A year later, we can look back and say, not so fast. Jobs and factories have not materialized, certainly not on any grand scale. Indeed, manufacturing payroll has actually declined over the past year, with 98,000 fewer jobs year over year. 98,000 fewer jobs. 29,900 fewer jobs in auto manufacturing. 18,000 fewer in wood manufacturing jobs. These are two sectors the president's tariffs were particularly aimed at trying to protect. Higher tariffs on steel and aluminum have hindered the construction of factories. the industry's hiring rate, often a reflection of confidence in the economy, is lower now than it was in 2019 or just before the onset of COVID. So the protectionist industrial policy has not done what Trump and all these people have promised it would do. Generally, people are super frustrated with the tariffs. It has very little support among the voters. Tariffs have driven up prices of selective goods. They've made life more expensive. The whole affordability, supposedly, the so-called affordability, it's an anti-concept, but the so-called affordability crisis is real, partially because of these tariffs, which have made a lot of what people buy on a regular basis more expensive. And, it's just made America, the way Trump used those tariffs that he launched on April 2nd now, has just made America thuggish. Every country has its own country-specific tariffs, and they all have their own so-called deals and trade policies, and it's been a mess and really a disaster. Nothing good has come of it. And then, of course, as we know, the Supreme Court ruled it all unconstitutional, and the consequence of that has been like a whole set of new tariffs that don't make any sense and have done really no good as a consequence. Right. The tariffs that were launched back then have been, without question, a major disaster, both in the courts and, more importantly, in the economy and in our relationships with our friends, because the tariffs were mostly targeted at our friends. Last month, Trump replaced some of these tariffs with a Section 301 investigation. This is where you have to go through investigation to determine unfair trade practices so that you can impose tariffs. He included dozens of trading partners in this investigation, including China, the EU, Japan, Switzerland, India. And that'll allow Trump to return to a country-specific tariff scheme once these investigations are done. And that will replace the 10% universal tariff, which he later raised to 15%, that he put when the court decided to throw out the Liberation Day tariffs. So generally, the tariffs that were passed a year ago with a lot of fanfare, with lots of promises. By the way, the $166 billion that were raised as revenue now have to be returned. And that's a major headache for the Treasury Department. And they need to be returned, by the way, with interest. And it's just an example of the complete unthinking nature of this administration. Complete unthinking nature of this administration. All right. One of the phenomena that have happened as a consequence of Trump's tariffs, is that our allies have gone looking for trade elsewhere. We talked about this on the show quite a bit. There's a lot of free trade deals that exclude the United States. The consequence, so there's a lot of going around it, so the rest of the world is somehow going to survive. We're the ones who are stupidly taxing our own people in order to do this, right? So you're going to see more deals by the EU, more deals by the UK, more deals even with China, more deals by Canada, and less and less and less interest in trading with the United States, given the complete insanity of what has happened over the last year with regard to tariffs. Maybe Trump's worst policy in his two terms was a year ago the tariffs, and it's also caused the friction with a lot of our allies, which is now being exacerbated by the war and by his threats to invade Greenland and all of that. But not good. Nothing good. I can't think of anything good to come out of the liberation tariffs. Literally nothing. All right, so that's 1 year anniversary of that. All right, this is breaking news. I don't have a lot to say about this, but it's news, and we do the news here on the Yaron Brook Show. Supposedly Trump has fired Pam Bondi, who was Attorney General. He did so in a meeting that he had with her yesterday, just before his speech. He had her at the Oval Office and told her that she would be fired in the days to come. He's going to keep her in administration. He's going to give her a different job, but she will no longer be the Attorney General. His disputes with her have to do with the way the Epstein files were dealt with. We still don't have all of them out. And again, if you dig in deep into them, Trump does not come out well from them, and he's not happy with that. But I think the main problem he has with Pam Bondi is that she did not go out and basically indict and arrest all of Trump's political opponents. He's got a list of people that, in his view, in his mind, need to be arrested, need to be persecuted and prosecuted and persecuted and prosecuted. And this is what MAGA is really passionate about. If all the things MAGA is passionate, this is the thing that really animates them. Jail them, put them in jail, pep walks. And, she tried, and the barrier she hit was the barrier of the American legal system. And she wasn't quite willing to completely ignore it and go all out. Now, it's interesting that supposedly he is thinking of replacing her with EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin, former congressman, who's done a good job at the EPA by the accounts I've read. But he doesn't seem like, Lee Zeldin does not seem like a MAGA crazy. He doesn't seem like the kind of guy who would go after all these people at the president's behest and ignore the rule of law. So it is going to be interesting to see who he appoints, whether he finds somebody that's more of a yes man than Pam Bondi. I mean, she was the ultimate yes woman. But she just couldn't do it. She just couldn't fulfill his wishes, his unlawful, arbitrary, random desires. Right. So we'll see what comes next. All right. There's been a lot of press around this guy running for governor in Florida, James Fishback. James Fishback is a candidate in the Republican primaries to replace, the current governor of Florida, who is termed out. He is young, energetic, and is attracting, by all accounts, large audiences of young Republicans. He's being interviewed. He's going on a lot of the big podcasts. He is getting a huge amount of attention, primarily by what you would call the far right. And what is amazing is just the level of interest is in him by young Republicans. So when he goes on campuses, he's a major hit. the young Republicans of like University of Florida, big backers of James Fishback, and so who is this guy? Now he's getting, to just be clear, in the polls at least, he's scoring very, very low. That he's not a real contender, at least according to the polls. But he's a real contender when it comes to young people, and we'll get to why that's important in a minute. He gets hundreds of people at any given talk that he gives. But again, those hundreds of people, all young, college age, in their 20s. And what is his agenda? Well, it's really an agenda of the far right. Here's some random stuff that he wants to do, right? He wants to put a 50% tax on OnlyFans. OnlyFans. So a porn site, basically. He wants to make it basically legal. For Florida business to hire H-1Bs. Let me do something here. One second. He basically wants to use the state in order to lower the cost of living for young Americans. He wants to make sure that no Florida money leaves the country. He's very anti-Israel. Probably anti-Semitic, or plays that game of somewhat anti-Semitic. So he basically is a fan of Nick Fuentes and plays to Nick Fuentes' crowd. He's defended Nick Fuentes on several occasions, right? And even sported Nick Fuentes merchandise himself. He sounds a lot like Tucker Carlson. I think has been on Tucker Carlson's show. He claims to be a patriotic Christian. He's Catholic. And that this country is a country for Christians, by Christians, for Christians. Again, very opposed to Israel. Very, again, the borderline anti-Semitic that is playing to all the anti-Semites without saying stuff that might cause you to just go over. Right. All right. Let me see what's just going on in the chat, just to clean it up a little bit. Let me see again. Let me see if this will work. Yep. All right. So he's clearly, whether he personally is a racist or not, and an anti-Semite, I don't know. But he plays to the racist Groyper crowd. He plays to the anti-Semitic crowd. In his own personal life, he's being sued by his former employer. He's being accused of being a con man. He's being accused of harassing his former girlfriend. He doesn't seem like a particularly nice guy, just in terms of his personal morals. But of course, why would that stop anybody given the president of the United States and who he is? Right? He says, for example, this is what he would do. If you're hiring H-1B workers for $40,000 and you would have paid a Florida worker, the American worker, $70,000, your fine is going to be $30,000. We're going to make it cost neutral. Because if it's the same cost, guess what? Who do you choose? We aren't choosing Indians because they're smarter, because they're better thinkers, because they're better communicators. Let's just be honest. The employers are choosing them because they're cheaper, which is, of course, is complete BS. Complete BS. They often are smarter And you know that by the fact that Indians are the highest earning, group in America. They are harder working. They are more dedicated. Some of them are better thinkers. And who's going to determine what you would have paid somebody? So he's a statist, an interventionist, and again, borderline racist. Well, why borderline? Just a racist. Who plays to all the kind of social issues and economic issues that animate young Republicans these days. Anti-Israel, anti-Jews, anti-immigrants, anti-H-1Bs. And yeah, we don't believe in entitlements unless we're the ones receiving them. Then we're cool with entitlements. Yeah, that's young Republicans. Now, supposedly, young Republicans, for example, in Florida, there's huge splits because the far right is taking over their groups at universities, and they're fighting among each other. So, this takeover by the far right, the noise that the goipers are making, we can dismiss it now because there's such a small segment of the population at the end of the day. But the reality is that will not necessarily stay that way. I mean, think about the Mamdani crowd. Where was the Mamdani crowd 5 years ago? 10 years ago? They were where James Fishback is now. They were attracting large audiences of young leftists on campuses, but scoring single digits in elections when it came to actually being elected to anything. And they kept building, they kept working, they kept inspiring their crazy troops, they kept radicalizing, they kept spouting this socialist nonsense, and they made socialism, acceptable among young Democrats. And those young Democrats, they grow up and they influence other Democrats. And slowly over time, they become dominant. And when the right circumstances happen, a Mamdani can win. So while right now the goipas and the far right and all these, they're not going to sway elections. But in 10 years, if they're not stopped, if they're not debated, if they're not ridiculed, if we don't show how absurd their positions are, if we don't challenge them, and most importantly, if we don't offer a positive alternative to them, then they will gain ground. They will grow in impact. And I know some of you are worried about fascism. Trump is not going to be the fascist who takes over this country. But 10 years from now, maybe it's somebody like James Fishback. Probably not. He's too sleazy and scummy and too obviously in it for the attention. But maybe somebody else who comes about, who's charismatic and holds these same ideas. And it's the James Fishbacks of the world, the Nick Fuenteses of the world, the Tucker Carlsons of the world, the Candace Owens of the world, who we didn't take seriously because they were all wacko. They prepared. They softened the culture up for exactly these ideas. So don't dismiss them because they can't succeed. I mean, Fishback is getting 4% right now in the Florida 2026 Republican primary. And Byron Donalds, who's a black Republican endorsed by Trump, has got 46% and probably will be the Republican candidate. But they're also 39% undecided. So who knows? Right? But yeah, he is very dangerous. And and the fact that this is so attractive to young people, that's where we really need to think about. What is it about him that makes him so appealing to young people? What is it about young people today that makes them attracted to Nick Fuentes and James Fishback and Tucker Carlson and basically kind of fascist-like ideas? And how do we challenge it? And how do we offer them an alternative? How do we offer them something better, something more exciting, something pro-life? Something about a real better future? Or does it all have to collapse before anybody learns anything? So we can learn from the rise of the left, kind of the wackiness, how the wacky left became mainstream. We can learn and extrapolate for how the wacky right is going to become mainstream. Watch out. All right, an interesting paper published today in Nature magazine. This is a paper that basically looked at 3,900 social sciences papers. These are papers in, let me just see here, what were the disciplines? Including economics, education, psychology, and sociology. And 860, so these are papers published in 62 different journals. They took the 3,900 papers and they had 865 researchers poring over these papers. And they tried to figure out whether these papers were right. These are published papers in respectable journals. Are the results, can they replicate the results? And what they found was, I don't think surprising, but what they found was that over half the cases, they could not replicate the results. Now, this is a big project that was run by, I guess, out of Stanford University, involved, again, hundreds of researchers. What they did was they tried to recreate the data and retest it. In only 52% of the papers could they even reproduce the results once they recreated the data. Now, in many of the papers, they couldn't reproduce the data. So either the authors didn't provide the data, or the data was obscure, or they couldn't access it. So out of 600 papers I looked at, only 145 actually contained enough detail to actually reproduce. And then of those, only half reproduced the results. So half, they managed to get the right data, but when they ran the tests, the results were different. Now, a lot of reasons why this could happen. There could be errors. They could be fraud. Or they could be, that they didn't reproduce the data accurately enough. And there could have been error or fraud in the original papers. But in every one of the different types of tests that they looked at studies' robustness, right? They looked at 100 papers. In 2% of them, they came to exactly the opposite conclusion of what the authors came to with exactly the same data. Opposite conclusion. Not just no conclusion, opposite. So, a lot of troubling results in the study that really, make you wonder about all these papers that come out and claim to have found something interesting. And this is true in economics, sociology, psychology, education. But it's also true in the medical sciences. You know, the diet stuff that comes out all the time, telling you, and the life extension stuff that comes out all the time. A lot of those studies are not replicable. And a lot of times, when people try to replicate them, they get very different results. So the thing is, don't get too excited by the stuff that you read, by so-called scientific results, statistical analysis. It's so easy to fudge results. It's so easy to do stuff that's not quite fraud, but tilts it in your favor if you know the kind of result you actually want to get. You've got to be careful of any kind of statistical papers out there, and particularly when they make strong arguments. This is why it's important when you get a result that's good or strong. Other researchers need to redo the study or do it a little differently or try to replicate. And only when 2 or 3 different studies, different groups show a particular result can you go, yeah, okay, now that makes sense. Maybe I'll act on that. Very difficult to act on anything that is reported that is just one study. All right. Thank you, guys. That is the news for Thursday, April 2nd. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to all the super chatters. Thank you for all the chatters, or most of the chatters. Not all of you behaved. Thank you. Wes just did a $50 sticker. Thank you, Wes. Really, really, really appreciate that. Thank you to Alan, also a sticker. CP Milken, thank you. CP Milken, named after one of my favorite financiers of all time. Greg, thank you for the sticker. And Enric, and I think I got everybody because I think I thanked some of you earlier. We can thank you again, though. Friend Hopper and Steven got us all started with the stickers. Thank you, guys. With Wes's $50 sticker, we are now down to only $100 to make our second hour goal. So please consider supporting the show so we can make our hourly goals. If we make them every show, yeah, that is fantastic. But that's kind of what's required, at least on a monthly basis. Once in a while we exceed, so sometimes we can be under. But on average, we have to make the goal because that's what I live on. And that's the target. And that's what makes it possible for me to do the show. Value for value, guys. And asking questions is great because you get to challenge me. You get to determine what I talk about, which is great. All right. Let me remind you of some of our sponsors. Iron Institute has got a conference in Porto, Portugal, on April 18th and 19th. It's coming up 2 weeks. It's going to be a lot of fun. I will be there. And Porto's a nice city. I think there's still time to join us. And if you're coming from Europe, it's probably still cheap to join us. So come on over. It's you can get a discount still using the discount code 26YBS10. 26YBS10. Let's see. Other sponsors. Alex Epstein. Alex Epstein is the world authority on, basically on everything to do with energy, fossil fuels, electricity, but also, unreliable energy sources like solar and wind and everything else. So check out alexepstein.substack.com for invaluable information about those topics, which are at the heart of what's going on in the world right now, and at the heart of whether we head towards a recession or not, what the cost of living is going to be moving forward. given the importance of energy in everything that we do. Yeah. And particularly now with how are we gonna provide energy to all these AI data centers that are going to be consumers of energy? Check out alexepstein.substack.com. All right, let's finally, one last reminder. I'll remind you one additional way to support the show, in addition to the stickers and the super chat, which you should do if we're live, if you're live on the show, on YouTube at least, is that you can support the show by Patreon, patreon.com, and just put Yaron Brook Show and become a monthly supporter. I know a lot of you have become monthly supporters through Patreon. Thank you. We definitely met our goal in March for adding Patreon subscribers. I think it's 10 a month. So yeah, I think we've got one already for April. So let's get another 10 in April. Let's keep that going on a regular basis. And yeah, you can become a monthly supporter at $2. $10 gets you a free stream of the podcast with no advertising. You can also get $25. You can get the be part of the panel on AMAs. At $250, you get a one-on-one with me once every quarter. At $500, you get one-on-one with me once every month, if you want to. Paul says the super chat is not working. That sucks. You can send me an email, Paul, and you can make a contribution on PayPal to cover it, if you want. All right. I've got my email open, so when you send the email, I'll have it. Let me just, since the email is open, let me scan it to see if there's anything urgent. Nothing urgent. All right. Let's see. It's weird that some days you can do the super chat, other days you can't do the super chat. It's all very strange. Okay, let's go to the super chat, and we'll start with Arthur, who has a $100 question. Thank you, Arthur. Really appreciate that. Really appreciate the. No, I don't see it. All right, really appreciate the $100. Arthur says, you don't think there will be another Dark Ages, but given the amount of hatred and desire for destruction out there, I wouldn't rule it out. How would a collapse into another Dark Ages play out sequentially? A gradual erosion of the concept of private property? I mean, what would happen is you'd get authoritarianism in the United States. Authoritarianism would lead to economic depression and stagnation. Well, depression, that is economic collapse. The economic collapse would be global. And, there would be no rebound from it. We would just descend further and further down. And the essence is authoritarianism. The essence is that there's no free speech. Much more important than private property. Here's a controversial statement. Much more important than private property is free speech in terms of freedom and in terms of the Dark Ages. So the government monitors everything. Think about all the dystopian novels you might have read. I don't know, 1984, whatever. The government monitors what you say, how you say it. It's involved in the economy. It's involved in the startup culture. And so all of that dies. People just get used to their day-to-day lives. Birth rates are already plummeting. They continue to plummet. So every one of our countries are shrinking. There's surveillance everywhere. The authorities have guns and are willing to use them. And, we basically shrivel up and die. So I think it's a negation of freedom of speech and the establishment of mass surveillance but it has to be under authoritarian government and the economic collapse. I think, and it has to be global, because one of the things I said about Dark Ages is, even in the Dark Ages, other parts of the world thrived, and I really think that I didn't get the email, Paul. I don't see how that would happen today. There's just too much information out there. There's too much knowledge. There's too many countries that have an element of freedom. This would really have to be global and on a scale that is hard for me to imagine happening. But I guess it could happen. But it's this is why I have to fight for free speech more than anything else. It's the number one concept we have to fight for. Property rights already eroded significantly. Significantly. And there are many countries that are okay economically but don't have property rights. Think of China. So it has to be more than that. Let's see. We are $84 short of our goal. We've got half an hour to make it. 4 $20 questions would be amazing right now. Amazing. Paul, I see you did ask a question, but then it stopped working after the first question he asked. That is really weird. Okay, here's Paul's question. Given the information we have now, how will the Iranian people be able to overthrow the regime after the bombing stops and establishes a freer country? Well, I think they would have to basically take to the streets and storm the institutions of government. They would have to take over the institutions of government. And I think that would be very difficult unless some parts of the Iranian military joined in with them. And part of it is that the IRGC is so weakened and so, dispirited, that they won't resist much. And that'll embolden certain elements within the Iranian military, as compared to the IRGC, to support the demonstrators and come out and help them occupy those buildings. So the military would have to flip. And we haven't, now it could be without them, but that's hard to believe that they could take over the whole country without some military, somewhere, in some places, actively supporting the demonstrators. You'd have somewhat of a civil war in the sense that the IRGC, the remnants of it, might put up a fight. But again, the IRGC has been weakened significantly. And I think a lot of its remaining generals will flee the country once collapse is happening. So there might be for a while a civil war. I don't think it would last that long. And here I think Israel and the United States could really help. That is, imagine as people out in the streets, there is an Israeli drone over Tehran shooting at any snipers who climb up on buildings, shooting at the demonstrators, shooting at the roadblocks and killing the IRGC people at the roadblocks, trying to shoot at the demonstrators. So imagine if they get aid from the air, maybe not from the ground, but from the air. And maybe over the last few months, the Mossad and the CIA have been arming some of the demonstrators so that they have weapons. You could imagine a combination of all of that they could overwhelm the remnants of the IRGC. And remember, a lot of the IRGC is just going to stay home. They've just been crushed by the Israelis and the Americans. Do they really want to go out into the streets and shoot their own people? a lot of them will just stay home. And that's, I think, how it plays out. Something like that. All right, Paul also says, at what point will Iran be unable to launch missiles? Do we have to wait for them to be all used up? I mean, they probably have a lot of missiles, so, in terms of just sheer numbers, they could probably launch for a very long time if they're just launching 1 or 2 or whatever, 10 a day. If they have 100 missiles, that's 10 days. If they have 1,000 missiles, which they probably do, that's 100 days. So they can still launch missiles. They can't build new ones, as far as we can tell. They can launch what they have. Again, most of the missiles are being shot down, and the number of missiles are shrinking every day as Israel and the United States bomb their stockpiles and their launches. So that number is shrinking. But yeah, if they're just launching a few every day, it can go on for a long time. Long time. Not your average algorithm. Part 1. A few thousand years from now, let's say we have machines that rearrange atoms to give us everything we need at the touch of a button, like those machines on Star Trek. If such technology is possible, we will have no need to produce and trade with each other in order to survive. While private property and individual rights will still exist, will it be somewhat post-capitalism? Well, I don't know what's going to happen in thousands of years from now, but think about it. Somebody is going to have to decide how to rearrange the atoms, and in what way, and for what purposes, and to achieve what ends. It's not that once you can rearrange atoms, all thinking must cease. And as a consequence, trade will still exist. Knowledge will still exist. As long as there's individuated knowledge, trade exists. And therefore, in that sense, nothing changes. But I don't want to say how things are going to be in 1,000 years. I have no idea. Right? Human beings might be a different species. We might have biologically re-engineered ourselves in some significant way. I don't know. We'll have chips in our brains, maybe. Again, I don't know. 1,000 years is a long time. Assuming technological advances from now until 1,000 years from now, I have no way to even start to speculate. But if all that's changed is now I can rearrange atoms, well, that's what we do today. All you're saying is, instead of rearranging atoms in a factory, maybe I can rearrange atoms faster, quicker, simpler. Okay? But it still requires thought. What to rearrange, how to rearrange, for what purpose to rearrange. Human needs, core human needs, are infinite. So there's always going to be some new thing that you want to achieve. So I don't think it changes things as that dramatically. But other things might change it. I mean, a lot of things will change in 1,000 years. The values that we have will be different, but you'll still be exchanging those values. Exchange will still be win-win. Exchange will still be value creating in and of itself, and therefore will still continue. Hopper Campbell, are we trying to cut through the fog of broken epistemology? Well, yeah. I mean, broken epistemology or good epistemology that never really existed, right? I mean, the majority of people never had a good epistemology. The intellectuals have never really had a good epistemology. So, yeah, I mean, there is a really, really bad epistemology out there that dominates most people's attempt at thinking, and we have to break through it somehow. But yeah, that's the missing link, right? Michael says, scrolling through the comment sections of some of your videos, and man, the anti-Semitism is off the charts. It's a sickness. They hate you before you were even born. Yes. And look, I think the internet overemphasizes these things. They gravitate towards certain places, a lot of them altogether. So we don't have a good real sense of how many people really like that. But it is clearly a growing tendency among the young right, among young Republicans. And it really is, it's scary. It's very, very scary and needs to be taken super seriously. Stephen, for your research on Christianity versus the West book, I highly recommend the 1970s miniseries Jesus of Nazareth. Incredibly well acted and directed, it made me understand Christianity from a historical perspective on another level. Thank you, Stephen. I'll copy-paste that and might try to catch that. But yeah, reading a lot about Christianity. So part of my research. All right, guys. I hate to bug you, but I'm going to anyway. Before I get to these other questions, that was all the $20 questions and the $100 question. So thank you, guys. Thank you, Arthur, and everybody else who did $20 questions. We're what are we now? Still $84 short of where we need to be. We're 138 people. Are listening. $1, $2 stickers, $10 stickers as a trade, value for value. I deliver, you trade with me. So let's do some value to value things. Let's, pay for what you are receiving. And that'd be great if we could close that gap in the next few minutes as we go through these questions. Roman asked, thoughts on gender conversion therapy ruling yesterday. I was going to look it up. I didn't see the ruling, so I will have to check it. I haven't, somehow I didn't focus on that one. Liam, is the only thing preventing us from winning this war our lack of willingness to send in ground troops or our lack of willingness to use tactical nuclear weapons? No, it's our lack of executing on strategy to open up the Homo states. That's it. That's what's missing. And what the strategy to open up the Homo states is something that you'd have to ask one of our generals for information about, because they are the ones who have a plan and they're not executing on it. And why is Trump not executing on it? Because they might be casualties, because it places American ships, the American Navy, at risk, because he didn't think of it in advance, because he wants to end this quickly and it might not be a quick ending, because he's not a strategic thinker and he's lashing out at NATO and at our allies. I don't know why, but the reality is that it just means executing on a strategy that they already have in writing. They just need to live up, they have to execute. and that means Trump has to decide to do it. Now, part of it might involve boots on the ground, and that might be the hesitancy. But even then, it's boots on the ground on an island, not on mainland. We're not marching to Tehran. We're not sending tanks and troops into mainland Iran. We're probably occupying a couple of islands. And yes, you'd have to put some anti-drone technology on there to protect the troops and stuff like that. But this isn't rocket science. U.S. military is very good at this. They know what they're doing. They know how to do it. Trump has to decide he's willing to do it. I think he's torn. He doesn't want boots on the ground, even on an island. He promised a short war. He wants it to be over. So he's putting his wishes above reality. Yeah. All right. Let's see. We got a bunch of stickers. This is great. Thank you, Jake. Thank you, Rob. Thanks, Louis. Any word about November? Or do I owe you an email? Maybe I owe you an email. Capitalist Spy, thank you. Paul finally got through with a sticker. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it. All right, we are down to $36. $36 to make our goal. No, not $46. I'm wrong. I can't do math anymore. $14. God, where did 36 come from? $14, that's it. 10 and a 4, and we're done. Rational IP. I really like the quote from Rourke. Here's the quote. I don't like people who have to be handled. Yes, that quote really resonated with me. I like that it both criticizes the current culture and creates this powerful mindset. Yes, I deal with people straight. I don't need to handle them. I don't want them to try to handle me. We just deal with one another. The only standard by which we deal with one another is reality, not emotional and other types of manipulation, which is what it means to be handled. Yeah, I like that quote too. Good deal, Rational IP, and thank you for the $20 question. James, Ayn Rand said, statism needs war. A free country does not. Since Trump is an unabashed statist, will we see a lot more wars throughout the remainder of his term? Not necessarily. Remember, this is a justified war. This is a war against a regime that needed to be eliminated. It's not being done well, partially because he's a statist, partially because he just can't think. But it's a war that needed to be done. It's a just war in that sense. So I wouldn't, he didn't engage in war in his first term. Will he do more wars this time? Maybe, but I don't know. Maybe Cuba, but that will probably look more like Venezuela than Iran. Harrison, in arguments I keep getting into on X, there's a waste of your time. I've noticed so many of the anti-war MAGA voices, accounts, that were only created a month ago and post 24/7 without breaks for sleeping. If they are robots or teams of human propagandists, who might be behind them? They are capable of speaking like Americans, but very few can answer what they think are bacon cheeseburgers. Well, I mean, they're Chinese or Russians or North Koreans or Iranians who might be using AI to post in English. So, I mean, it's well documented that the Chinese, and particularly the Russians, but even the North Koreans and the Iranians, all run psychops on X, doing exactly that. It's one of the reasons you shouldn't get into arguments on X, because you're just arguing with a machine. You're arguing with a nobody. What's the purpose? Ignore them. The argument gives them attention, creates activity around their posts, and raises their visibility. Michelle, the freer a system is, the better. It explains why the U.S. medical system is the most innovative. But isn't there a contradiction price-wise? No. I mean, the contradiction is that, particularly in terms of price, which is determined by who buys the healthcare, most of the healthcare in the United States is bought by the government. I'll say this again. Most of the healthcare in the United States is bought by the government. Medicare, Medicaid, and the VA. And therefore, there is no free market mechanism to drive costs down. If you look at LASIK, which is not covered by Medicare, Medicaid, and which is not even covered by third-party insurance, prices have gone down a lot. Also, the United States has a perverted, distorted third-party mechanism of insurance, which raises costs. Because you, the consumer, don't have any visibility into those costs and don't really have any visibility and choice with regard to your insurance, because you get it through your employer, which is the dumbest system ever. Insurance should be something you buy for yourself. And you should customize it for your needs. And you should be able to get an insurance for a whole lifetime, or for 10 years, or for 20 years, or for lots of different ways in which insurance could be modeled. And the insurance then, and should only cover catastrophes, hospital stays, really bad stuff. Most stuff you should pay cash. And that'll completely change the dynamics of the system. And Medicaid, of course, should be phased out, privatized. Only then will you have a system that actually reduces prices. But even when it comes to prices, I mean, nobody knows this, right? Do you know that we Americans pay the lowest prices in the world, basically, for generic drugs? Like, we pay really high prices, because we're subsidizing the rest of the world, on drugs that ain't patent, but we pay the lowest prices on generic drugs. So even when it comes to price, and part of what people do is they look at total expenditure per person in the United States. Yeah, we spend a lot of money on healthcare, but part of that is because we test. I can go and get an MRI now for my back, and the insurance will cover it because I've got back problems. And now I can do that every couple of years. I can do it every year probably. At no cost to me. The insurance will cover it. If I were living in Israel, I were living in Europe, I couldn't do that. There's no way I could get an MRI every year. I want an MRI, let's say, every year because I want to know what the status of my back is, how the exercising impacting it. I've had surgery there. I want to know how it's standing up. But that's kind of information. Yeah, if I'm going to get more information, I have a lot of blood tests done. Insurance pays for it. I just want to, I want the data. I want to know what's going on with me. I'm willing to pay. So what's the right price? What's the right cost for healthcare? How much should a person spend on healthcare? What they spend per capita in England or what they spend per capita in the United States? I don't know. Maybe we're not overspending on healthcare in the United States. Maybe they're underspending. So until you have a free market, a real free market, you won't know what people's actual preferences are with regard to healthcare costs. So we want to free a system, but as long as it's not free, there will be distortions. And prices could be distortions we pay. But it's very hard to untangle the mess that is the mixed economy healthcare system and figure out what affects what. All right, Roland, trying to keep up with the Mossad in terms of donations. Well, I hope that if the Institute or me get money from the Mossad, it's more than what you're giving. But I hugely appreciate what you are giving. Harrison asks, Nate, what do you think of bacon cheeseburgers? Did he ever answer you? I don't know if he ever answered you. All right, Paul, different Paul. For a young leftist who could be open, might Andre's idealism and tragedy in We the Living and Kira's uplifting positive example be a better first book to offer than The Fountainhead? I mean, maybe, but it's very unusual that a young leftist would be as idealistic as Andre. But it's interesting. I just haven't met many people who read We the Living and, in a sense, got converted. Went, wow. But, it's worth a shot. It's worth trying. It's a good book. Great story. Oyvind, do you think Europeans should join the war for their own interests? If so, just to play defense and Straits of Hormuz, I think there are at least three arguments to be had. One, help stabilize oil prices, secure EU tankers. Two, Iran can be a threat to Europe now, shown through ballistic missiles. Three, there comes a time after Trump. Yeah, I mean, I think all three are valid. I definitely think Europe should get involved. I definitely think Europe should get involved with opening the Straits of Hormuz. I don't think they need to do anything more. And I don't think really Israel and the United States need them to do anything more. They should get involved in opening the Straits of Hormuz. They should send whatever navies they have down to the Arabian Sea and into the Straits of Hormuz and help with the opening of it up. I don't think that's a lot to ask. The challenge is that Trump has been a jerk, and that Trump has alienated all of them. And he continues to alienate them, but primarily because of Greenland. But then, everything, his whole attitude towards Europe has been alienating. So, but they should realize that it's in their self-interest. They will suffer. They have a huge energy bottleneck, and they need the Straits of Hormuz to open so that energy, particularly LNG, but energy more broadly, starts flowing so that their economies don't take a big hit. So yeah, they should all be volunteering their navies right now. Roman, should states have at least one official, and by the way, as I said, let me just return to that. As I said, the fall of Iran, the fall of the Iranian regime would have profound impact on the Islamist problem that the Europeans have. It would take the wind out of the sails of Islamists. It would destroy their ideal. It would destroy a huge funder. So Europe has a huge interest in seeing the Iranian regime fall. It should be promoting regime change aggressively. I don't think it needs to actually get involved in the fighting to achieve that. But just saying, yes, we think regime change in Iran would be amazing, not only for the Iranian people, but for Europeans, because they would stop funding all this irrationality. That would be huge. All right, Roman, should states have at least one official language as a unifying force to make the law understandable for everyone? If not, should laws be translated? Yes, definitely have one official language. Everybody should understand that one language so that everybody can communicate and they can understand the laws as written. So one official language to every country. Clark Young, Destiny keeps mentioning Ayn Rand on his podcast. Can you convert him? No. There's no way I can convert Destiny, and shouldn't try. It's a waste of time. Fender Hopper, so ARI is 100% by the Mossad. Yeah, absolutely. I heard that they give ARI $1 million bazillion, actually a gazillion, not a bazillion, a gazillion dollars a month. So per source I can't name or they will get me. Prove why it may or may not be true or false. No, it's absolutely true, but I can't prove it because I'd have to kill you if I proved it to you, or something like that. Stephen, I always felt sorry for the faithful son in the prodigal son story. Is that story just another example of altruism and Christianity turning morality and justice on its head? So the prodigal son story is, a father welcomes back his wasteful younger son with open arms and unconditional love. After wasting his inheritance, the son returns home, expected rejection, but is met with massive celebration. That is, it really is trying to push the idea of unconditional love. And that is at the heart of altruism, at the heart of Christianity. The idea that love should not be conditioned. You should love your enemy, you should love everybody. It's not conditioned by behavior. And certainly family is above all. So it's definitely altruism, even if they've behaved badly, if they've behaved stupidly, if they've done wrong, if they've wronged you, they're your children. Therefore, you should love them no matter what. So I think it's a very, very sacrificial, the father is being sacrificed to the son here in the name of Christian love and Christian altruism. Michael says, while socialist policies like Medicare and NHS and pension programs have not been reversed, the pro-market reforms of Reagan and Thatcher have not been reversed either. They haven't? There's been a ton of a ton of regulations passed since Reagan and Thatcher, particularly in England, but certainly in the United States, that have reversed some of the deregulation that was done back then, or added to the regulatory burden that Thatcher Reagan would have never done. Some stuff that was privatized under Thatcher, like the railroads, have now been renationalized, at least portions of them. Taxes that Reagan simplified are not simple anymore. They've been completely bamboozled and confused and raised in some cases. So no, I don't think that's true at all. A lot of it has been reversed. A lot of it has been reversed. Now, the big deregulatory bills that were passed in the 70s and early 80s under Jimmy Carter primarily have not been reversed. But others have been instituted instead. And usually it's done at the regulatory agency level. Banking is a lot more regulated now than it was in the 80s, for example. And there's other examples. No, I still say Trump is a TAFO. Trump always fights on. Yeah, he is a smarto. He is not a smarto. Just funding the show you're on, I have no question. All right. TAFO, smarto, FAFO, fofo, whatever. You all know what I think of Trump. All right, guys. Thank you. Really appreciate it. We did make our goal and right on the dot at 2 hours, too. So really, really appreciate all the super chatters, all the sticker people. Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting the show. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like the show before you leave. Please press that like button. It doesn't cost you anything. If you want to support the show, go to patreon.com. Yaron Brook Show. Become a monthly supporter. And if you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. Please subscribe to the show. So like, subscribe, Patreon. See you guys. Today's Thursday. Tomorrow, Friday, same time.